Court, counsel, good morning. On November 1st, 2022, 7-month-old Uriel Shock died alone and forgotten, trapped in a hot car. How did this happen? How did this tragedy happen? How did this 7-month-old baby girl come to be where she was? Her grandmother, the defendant, Tracey Nix. To understand how all this happened, let's go back to that day, November 1st, 2022. Tracey Nix that day, the defendant, went to a prayer meeting with some friends. Brenda Knight, Barbara Knight, Judy Terrell. They had a meeting. During that meeting, it was discussed that we should go to lunch. Let's go to Beef O'Brady's. Okay. The defendant didn't go there right away. You see, she has a daughter, Kayla Nix. Kayla Nix also has a daughter, Uriel Shock, also known as Yuri. That day, Kayla had a hair appointment. And with any 7-month-old, she needed someone to babysit so she could go get that done. So she called her mother. Who else would you call, right? A good babysitter that you can leave her with. So that's what Kayla did. And it was agreed that the defendant would come to Kayla and her husband Drew Shock's business and pick up little Yuri. And then take care of her for most of the day till the end of the day, around 5 o'clock after the business closed. And that would be that. So the defendant got in her vehicle. She leaves that prayer meeting. She drives to Kayla's business. She picks up 7-month-old little Yuri. She gets a car seat, puts it in the back of her vehicle. She gets a diaper bag because she's going to be taking care of a 7-month-old. She needs all the supplies. She needs diapers, she needs wipes, she needs food, she needs extra clothing. So she gets all that, puts it in her vehicle. Brenda Knight, Gail, who's also she's known as, it can be confusing sometimes, but we heard her called Gail. She was with her at that time. And she saw her get all this stuff. They then proceeded to Beef O'Brady's. Now, this is around a little after the 12 o'clock hour or so. They get there, they eat lunch there. It's the defendant, Gail, Brenda, and Judy. They eat their lunch. The defendant, and Yuri's there with the defendant. She's taking care of her. She's being attentive towards her. She brings the diaper bag in, sets it down, does everything that's expected of a good babysitter. Looks out for Yuri that entire meal. Is attentive to her, holds her, bounces her on her knee, feeds her, takes a straw, puts it in the water, puts it in little Yuri's mouth. Everything a good babysitter should do. That's what she did. That's what you're going to see. Now, when did they leave? Well, you're going to hear from all the ladies that were with the defendant that day that Gail had a young grandson who was 5 years old. And she was pretty insistent to make sure they all knew, I got to go pick him up at 1:50. So they all know. We left probably around 1:40. Between 1:40 and 1:50 because Gail had to get there. She was insistent. They leave Beef's. The defendant grabs Yuri, grabs a diaper bag, goes to the car, opens the door, puts her in the back seat, puts her in the car seat, like a good babysitter should, closes the door, gets in the vehicle, drives straight home. About a 10-minute drive. She gets home. She parks her car by the house, gets out of the vehicle, closes the door, goes in the house. Never grabs Yuri. Yuri's still in the back seat. Waiting. Sleeping. Whatever it may be, she's back there. Grandma doesn't get her. She goes into the house, plays with her dog, practices piano. While she's playing with her dog, time passes. And Yuri's suffering. While she's playing the piano, time's passing, and Yuri's alone in that vehicle. She's also, on her mind, what's her primary focus is that she's got another grandchild that she's supposed to spend time with that day, and she's focused on that. She's messaging back and forth with the mom, Rebecca Tucker. She's focused on all these other things. And while she's focused on that, time passes, and Yuri suffers. Hours go by. Hours. You're going to hear that Tracey Nix is there. That's Kayla's dad. And he's out there doing things that dads do, and nowadays moms do, but mowing the lawn, taking care of the property. And their property, they have a house proper, then they have a garage, more barn. It's a large structure towards the back, and that's where he is. And the defendant thinks, oh, I should bring him some tea. So she grabs for herself, for him, gets into the vehicle where little Yuri has been this entire time. And now we're closer to the 5 o'clock hour. The entire time. And drives to the back of the property, next to that barn, or next to the barn/garage. And she's still there. And she's still not thinking about it. Suddenly, oh my God, she realizes it. Hours later, she remembers, oh, I have this 7-month-old that I'm responsible for that's completely dependent upon me. She obviously lets Nay know. From there on out, it's a mad rush. He grabs her out of the vehicle, puts her on the ground, starts doing CPR. 911's called. By that time, sometime in this period when Yuri's being taken from the vehicle, put on the ground, that's when Rebecca Tucker gets there with the grandson that the defendant was so focused on. She calls 911. And you can hear it in her voice, the desperation. And all she can think about, Rebecca Tucker, is, I need to get my son away from this. This isn't good. And you can hear her tell the 911 operator that. She's like, my mother will call you, my mother will call you. And meanwhile, May is frantically trying to give CPR to this little 7-month-old. EMTs arrive to the scene, and they take over, and they do their best. They do what they can. But, unfortunately, they noticed it's too late. It's too late. They had to stop life-saving measures at the scene because they noticed she was already showing signs of rigor and lividity, and they'll explain what that is, but clear signs, she ain't coming back. So they stopped. She was brought to the hospital anyway because the scene is so emotional. There are people there that are obviously upset. The defendant is upset. Her husband's upset. Everyone there is upset. This is an upsetting event for everyone involved. So it was best just to bring her to the hospital. And from there, after she was brought to the hospital, there's no treatment. She's already gone. They brought her to the morgue. They brought her to the medical examiner. Members of the jury, that's what we're looking at here. Those are the events. That's how we got here. Let's talk about a few things that you're going to see and hear from other than what I've already talked about. I said she was brought to the morgue. She was brought to the medical examiner's office. That's Dr. Barabone, and she performed what's called an autopsy. And she, based on her examination, when she viewed it, Yuri died of hyperthermia. I don't think you need to be a doctor to understand that. Hypothermia is freezing. Hyperthermia, basically she overheated to death. That's what you're going to hear. And all the things that I talked about that the defendant was doing, you're going to hear that from her own mouth. She gave a statement. You're going to see and hear it. You're going to see a few other pieces of evidence, photos, things of that nature. You're going to see the body cam footage. of when the detective showed up. And you're going to hear again from the defendant at that time. Members of the jury, at the end of this case, we're going to do what's called closing arguments. And in our system, you are given instructions on the law at the end of the case, because we want you to focus on the facts. And that's what I would ask you to do. I know during jury selection, there was some talk of, it's not about the act, it's not about the result. I disagree. Members of the jury, we are here today and for the next few days, not to determine whether or not Tracey Nix is a good person. We want to focus on her actions, inactions, and the results of those actions. And if you do that, and you focus on those facts as we go through here today, you're going to come to several conclusions. You're going to come to the conclusion that this was a tragedy, that this was negligence. But when you hear the law, you're going to determine that negligence was a crime. And I'm going to ask you that you find her guilty of the crime of aggravated manslaughter of 7-month-old Yuri. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.